Okay, so welcome everybody to the CIO Summer Series. My name is Thomas Donnelly and I am the CIO of BetterCloud. The post-pandemic boom is coming, which means it's the perfect time to improve your onboarding process. We're going to get into creating the perfect first day, but first some housekeeping items and some introductions. This webinar will be recorded and emailed to all registrants. Questions Q&A use the Zoom chat feature, and we'll address those after the webinar. And don't forget to join parts 2 and 3 of the Strategic CIO Summer Webinar Series. Today's speakers are Emily Connery, Head of People and Talent at ChartHop. So Emily, if you want to give everybody a quick wave.
Hi, everyone.
And we have Courtney Harrison, the Chief Human Resource Officer at OneLogin.
Hello.
So we're going to start out with some quick introductions. So let's start with Emily. Emily, if you want to give everybody a quick introduction, and then you can pass it off to Courtney.
Sure, yes. So first of all, I'm honored to be here. My love for BetterCloud and BetterCloud's community goes way back to when I used to work at BetterCloud a few years ago. So thank you so much for having me. I hope that I can bring some helpful insights that you can bring back to your companies. I've been in HR at tech companies for about 10 years, and I love the crazy build process. I love the teamwork and the energy of scaling companies, and I have certainly spent a lot of time working on onboarding. So I'm very excited to share some experiences and insights on the topic of onboarding today. And what brought me to ChartHop is I was actually the second customer of ChartHop. So I'm the first HR hire at the company, and we are very much focusing on the onboarding process right now as we scale up this year. So I can share a lot of what we're doing today.
Great.
I'll go. So Courtney Harrison, and I too am excited to be here. We absolutely love BetterCloud, so it's fun to be working together with you. And I have been at OneLogin for 3.5 years now. And before that, I was a consultant for about 3 years as well, mostly focused in startups. So while I'm not doing what Emily's doing right now every single day, trying to build up from scratch, I was in there trying to help companies figure out how to scale from 10 people up, or from 100 to 1,000, or 1,000 to 5,000. So super passionate about startups and helping them scale effectively, especially if they're going to be wildly successful, because I believe you got to build that infrastructure in advance. And before that, though, early in my career, I was with Fortune 500, so American Express, GlaxoSmithKline. I was head of HR for the United States Olympics going into Beijing. So I've jumped around to all kinds of industries and all kinds of sizes. And I also spent about 5 years at Juniper Networks. That was where I really got into my first true tech company, as opposed to being around tech and all those other product companies. And I just keep going back to startups. I just love them.
Great. So as stated, I'm Thomas Donnelly. I'm the CIO of BetterCloud. I've been here for around 8 months. I've been in technology for over 2 decades. I joined BetterCloud because the founder, David Politis, and I really share the vision that IT should be strategic. And so that's a big reason why we're here today, to talk about the strategic aspects of IT. I was onboarded during the pandemic. So this topic is really kind of near and dear to my heart because I just went through this. And I'm excited to hear both Emily and Courtney's perspective on this, especially Courtney coming from a larger company background, and then Emily, very early stage startup. So I think it'll be a great conversation. So the pandemic has dramatically increased the need for remote work and SaaS workforce. This is the backdrop to kind of 3 trends that are starting to play out. As the pandemic slows down, many are ramping up and hiring. The second thing that's happening is most onboarding is now remote and supporting hybrid work. The third thing is, because of this, most companies have shifted to acquiring the best talent wherever they live throughout the country. So the first question is kind of for both of you. What changes are you hearing about on the grapevine and are seeing in your own organizations? And how has this changed over time? Let's start with Emily on this one.
Sure. So to speak to ChartHop specifically, ChartHop was essentially born right before the pandemic. So we only had flex space for about 2 months, and then we shifted immediately to completely remote. And we're actually going to stay that way because in terms of finding talent, it really opens the doors wide open. People can be where they want to be. That means that we have to, be flexible in terms of the sort of schedules that we need to stick to. It means that in terms of communication, we need to be much more intentional. It also means we need to be very intentional about fostering connectivity. People, to your point, Tommy, you onboarded remotely. I did too with ChartHop. We're not meeting people in person. We're not seeing people in the kitchen, in the hallways. So everyone needs to be much more intentional about communication, about creating those connections with people, and onboarding plays a huge, huge role in that. I think there needs to be more automation, more self-serve, and more social engineering to make sure that that onboarding experience is really top notch and makes a positive impression on that new hire coming in. So more than ever, IT needs to be that unsung hero in the background, making everything run smoothly from a tech perspective, so that all the operational stuff isn't at the forefront of the new hires experience, and instead they can focus on meeting people, learning about the company, and getting right into their jobs.
Great. Courtney, you want to give us your perspective on this?
Sure. So we've been around a lot longer than ChartHop. We definitely didn't come around right before the pandemic. So we've been practicing it, I think, every way there is. And I will say, though, we were lucky because we've been around for a while. We did have a workplace flexibility policy that we created, not way before COVID, but before COVID. But honestly, it was more because our population wanted to move out of more expensive cities like Redmond and like San Francisco to have kids and to have houses. And so we had a great conversation up front about, does it matter where they are? Does it relate to the physicality of the role important? Is it a trust thing? Can they not do it in their first year? So we were lucky. We had a lot of these conversations up front and put in a policy that included how are we going to deal with comp if someone left San Francisco and went to Atlanta, let's say, or to a much smaller town. So we did have a little bit of head start. That said, we had certainly never had 100% of people working remote. We had never done remote recruiting. We do, and we still will have part of our onboarding in person. We truly believe about that hybrid mix between IT and the humanity aspect of it all. So we had that, but we ended up hiring a third of the people that we have today during COVID. So we had no choice but to practice, and thank you to my IT department. I just don't know how they made it through all that chaos of just everybody leaving at once for a really long period of time, and us just saying, okay, we got to recruit this way, and we got to now onboard 100% this way, and they did a fabulous job. But to Emily's point, while we did some decent social engineering, I still don't think it's as good as in person. So I am still always going to be a big believer that it's a hybrid model. We keep using the word hybrid as though it's be at work or not, but I also think IT and HR workforce practices need to be a hybrid. And so sometimes it's 100% human, and sometimes it's 100% digital, and sometimes it's a blend. And so that's how we've been looking at it, but we are really, really focused. The one we're still struggling with, but there is good software for it, and I will be bugging IT about it soon, is the importance of informal networks, especially in a hybrid remote world. It isn't as simple as am I in the office or out. So that's where we're spending a lot of time really thinking about it, and it will continue to be something critically important for IT and HR partners.
I love that you were so far ahead of that trend of people being able to come out of those bigger cities or those more expensive cities, and you've really seen an explosion of real estate in people, places like Bend, Oregon, or Denver, so kind of following with those trends. So I love also the part about building those relationships and that informal network. So can you give me specifics? Is it all software? Is there other things that y'all are doing to kind of facilitate those connections where people are, feeling isolated in their house? They haven't really met anybody. Like, what have y'all done specifically to help those people?
We haven't used the software yet, but that is my next step. It was coming before COVID, but we just had to obviously deal with COVID. There's fabulous software. It's a passion of mine. It's called organizational network analysis software. Used to be super expensive back when I was at Juniper Networks and we played with it. It's now pretty inexpensive. So we haven't used it yet, which is why we have to kind of go back to the old school way. We are going to be bringing everybody back for the same week we were before COVID because everyone misses it. So we have a 12-week, not just your first perfect day. Of course, we want that. We love a perfect every day, by the way. But we shoot for the first 12 days, 12 weeks, first 90 days. We know how important, like somewhere in there, is to get this right. And we learned a ton during COVID to be able to say, how can we optimize? Because we did get better during this to make sure that first week or two, absolutely, where HR and IT are on point. But then we are, as soon as, in fact, my boss said, can we start this month? And I can't do it this month. I'm going as fast as I can. We are going to bring everybody back. And so what we do is we bring them all back for a week to the mothership so they can see and feel San Francisco. A lot of our execs are there. And we can go to dinners, we can go to coffees. We build the cohort together and they run around San Francisco for half a day and have real work projects to do to talk to potential customers. So it isn't just goofy and fun. I have not found a way to replace that as well yet. And everybody who went through it just misses coming back. So we are going to go back to our blend, but out of those 12 weeks, 1 week's going to be 100% in person. And then the rest of it will be a combination of all online or hybrid online for once they leave us after their month here, after their week here in their first month and go back.
Cool. All right. So we know that getting onboarding is critical to a great employee experience, getting that right. According to Bamboo HR, a highly effective onboarding process makes a new employee 18 times more likely to feel committed to the organization. And according to SHRM, 69% of employees are more likely to stay with a company for 3 years if they experience great onboarding. So question for Emily, do you see the onboarding process as a competitive advantage?
Absolutely. I mean, that first impression of a company is going to be the difference of someone responding to a recruiter message or not. So I think, being ready for someone's arrival from an IT perspective, that means that they don't really have to think about any of that, right? That they can log into everything. There are no issues. They have their equipment. The security side of things is streamlined, right? It's easy to understand how to use OneLogin, for example. Just removing any of those possible technical challenges, because that is what really frustrates people, especially with the remote model where you don't have that nice friendly IT face that can come over to your desk and help you with an issue and hold your hand through the challenge. You have to kind of triage yourself, which means I think more self-serve, more tools probably for various things to make sure that it's easier for new hires to understand how to use everything. Because you really, again, want them to be able to focus on the social aspect of things. They should be focusing on meeting their new colleagues and learning about their new job, right? Setting up those intro meetings, just to touch on what you were speaking about earlier in terms of that social engineering. We have company meetings twice a week. We do virtual coffees and lots of different social things. Maybe it's virtual meals or show and tells, right? We have to get creative about it. But if people are feeling like, I don't even know how to log into this really important tool that I have, they're not going to have the brain capacity to really be present and enjoy meeting team members. So, like I said before, I think IT's role is even bigger these days.
Yeah, kind of making it frictionless.
Yes, exactly.
So they can kind of up-level their thinking and really, get into their job and feel comfortable and not have that stress of like an ambiguous situation with technology. Totally agreed.
Yeah.
So Courtney, regarding an employee's journey, how has onboarding changed in priority for OneLogin?
So it's interesting because going back to my first thing, I think we're a little bit unique. And usually really small companies, either you don't have the money to bring people in. So that decision was very cultural for us with my boss. It was actually the very first project I did. I came on as a consultant, actually, not as the head of HR. And he'd give me a couple of projects to do. And one of them was to look at onboarding at that point. So as CEO, Brad Brooks feels super strongly about it for a myriad of reasons, all the way from, I won't repeat what Emily says, because yes, that's, the first couple of days, my computer's not working and no one's helping me already. They think they've made a bad decision. So I'm going to build off of it from there. Clearly we're also focused on, besides it's, the words I try to use, we are a security and identity access company. So I'm going to say it has to be secure from day one, especially now with everybody remote. But I mean, that should be simple and it should be seamless to them. And that's what we really work hard to do. But then after that, the goal, right, is to also get them as productive as quickly, and they're not separate. So if I'm frustrated and my computer's not working and IT's not answering and HR is not there, not only am I frustrated, I'm also not productive. But that productivity, trying to ramp that up, especially in a startup, a ton of people, is critically important. So I love the fact, and I always have to tell the story to give my CEO credit. When I went back in and said, okay, here's what we did. We were kind of looking at the first 90 days, probably, 90 days to 120 days is super critical. And I said, are you okay if we still fly people in? Because what we did was we laid out what those days should look and feel like, what the outcome should be from an employee experience, but I'm also going to add the people manager experience. And so how is it for them? They've got day jobs to do. They've got new people all over the place. Can we make teaching easier? Are there things we can do up front to help them understand what we call must-know knowledge, not nice-to-know knowledge, that we take off their plate through training, through onboarding online or learning online before you come? What about in the first week? And then there's that week we fly everybody in, and that is in your first month, everybody comes in, and we really looked at the must-know knowledge, but why would you do that in person versus do it online? So it's all hybrid, all our learning is hybrid. And so with that, when I went into them, I said, I know we're small and I know we're global now. Can we still afford to fly everybody in? And he said, not only can you not afford it, the ROI will be tenfold of this informal relationship. So I said 3 days because it's kind of expensive to San Francisco. And he said, not 3, 5. And I mean, and that's just the rarity. And it is why I took the job full time, because he understood the importance of, they better be happy when they get here from their first day or those first 2 weeks that you're working with HR and IT. And then I want them to come here and have celebrations and go out to dinner with the execs and meet them and whatever, so that when they leave and fly away back to their virtual worlds, they have a whole different side of things. And so I think that makes us fairly unique. And what we did was start with the outcomes first. What would be ideal for the employee at the end of these 3 months? And what would be ideal for the people manager? And we didn't say online or not. We said, what's the outcome? Then we backed into, we could do that 100% digitally, fast and easy. We could do that 100% in person. And of course, the majority of the 12 weeks is a hybrid.
Very cool. So as a CIO, I love hearing HR being, tightly aligned with IT, and just curious, like, how do you engage with IT when you're going through this process? Are you kind of driving the overall experience and leaning on them for support? We kind of have a different model at BetterCloud and how our IT engages with the business. So just curious how that relationship with IT and how you kind of achieve these objectives that you spoke about.
If I could just jump in, I would say at ChartHop, we don't yet have our IT hire. We are going to be posting the job soon. So I really miss that marriage with the IT professional. In previous jobs, though, very much a partnership, from start to finish, from when a new hire gets their offer through their first 90 days, 6 months, however detailed you're getting with your onboarding plan, really mapping that out with the IT person to understand, what can we do to streamline before they start? What information can we give them to self-serve? What is the service level agreement for you and employees, so we can make that really clear? How did they do ticketing? What can they come to you? What can they Slack you about, for example, just to create that really great relationship. But having, a specific channel for IT and HR to talk about onboarding, offboarding, all hands meetings, right? These things that we are doing together to really make a very positive experience for employees, where they don't even know that we're there, right? That we are just behind the scenes. And something that occurred to me too, I think IT has the opportunity now to really make new hires look good. Because if you show up to your first meetings at your new company and you can't figure out how to get into your Zoom or share your screen, or you can't find something, you're telling your first conversation with your manager is about not being able to get into things, or doing something that you're not supposed to with your software, then you're not showing up very great, right? That's not a good first impression of you. So I think working with IT to make sure the new hire looks good that also creates a great onboarding experience. They feel like this is a good place for them. They can be themselves, they can succeed, and they can get to productivity faster.
Great, great. So Emily, internally, what are your ChartHop's expectations for new employees on day one, and how close is this to your vision for the perfect first day?
We are far away from the vision of the first perfect day. That's for sure. I'm 2 months into my time at ChartHop. So people team, we've just hired everybody that we need for the year on the people team, which is very exciting. But like I said, we still do not have an IT person. So I think until we hire that person and get BetterCloud, we will be much closer to the vision of the first perfect day. But I think what I really want for a new hire, like I've said, is that they can just focus on forming relationships and focus on like learning the product, learning about all the processes. So this means that before they even get in the virtual door, that all their paperwork is done, from an admin perspective, everything is complete, which definitely involves a lot of partnership with IT and HR. This means that warm and fuzzy messages have been sent. And reminders for that. Technology plays a big role in reminders for that, right? Like if you have new hire buddies and the hiring manager and the recruiter, some team members helping them, hey, Tommy's starting next week. Why don't you reach out to him? That ends up being a lot of work on HR to manually remind everybody. So partnering with IT to see how you can streamline these things and do that social engineering really makes a better experience. Making sure their equipment arrives on time. That's huge. If somebody doesn't have what they need, right, that leaves a lasting impression. I want them to be able to jump on to their jump start calls, as we call them, on their first day without any issue. Being given, the sort of checklist that they can dive into. They have access to everything, that it's not a scavenger hunt sort of experience. Or like a password memory game, which is where OneLogin would come in. That really drives me nuts. So, in terms of where we are, I think we're far away from that, but I hope in the coming months we get a lot closer.
Great, thank you. And thank you for the plug for BetterCloud and OneLogin.
Yes.
Of course.
So Courtney, what are some of the ways in which you partner with IT for onboarding?
Sure. So, we really try to eat what we cook, because if it's not fun for our employees, it's certainly not fun for our customers who use our products. So do I think we have the perfect first day every time? No, but I know we're better than we've ever been. And we certainly got a lot of practice during COVID. So it just goes, building off what Emily said, it's everything there. Day one is for us is laptop, right? Is like, do they have it? Is the keyboard right for that country? Like, let's just get all that stuff right. And then from there, on day one, they're up and running, right? So as part of the OneLogin platform, that's the beauty of that. And so we do a combination in that first day of obviously ensuring the laptop's up and running, and then all the apps go on as part of the OneLogin platform. All their apps are provisioned for them, so they're not doing password chasing and all of that. And that leaves room for the one-on-one personal meetings with HR and IT. So Emily, don't feel so bad. We've been around a long time. I do feel bad you're waiting for your first hire, but we have a really tiny IT team that does a wonderful job. But they still stop to meet in person, because we just believe if you're struggling and troubleshooting and frustrated, let somebody handhold you through the process if something's still going wrong after all the prep that we've done. So they do that. And then the other kind of cool thing, and it goes back to how your original question, tell me about how do you partner with IT? Like earlier on, it's kind of interesting. I've had to think about it as I was prepping for this. A ton of our clients that came on board still had never done anything in the cloud. So we would see it was kind of age related or like generation related. So people would come on their first day, and if you had onboarding that like, let's get into Slack and do whatever, and then you'd have somebody being like, I've never been on Slack. What C-suite? And honest to Pete, I remember sitting there thinking, I'd never really thought of this. And that was more people coming on board than not at the time. So it got us in these interesting conversations partnering with IT, which was, okay, what can we do ahead of time so you don't embarrass them in the open forum? Because you're sitting there with a bunch of people that are like, oh, I use Slack and I use this and somebody's afraid to raise their hand. And that was such an interesting thing. So what we started doing was asking them in advance and saying, these are the workforce apps we use. And then it was, we went back and forth between HR and IT. Do you want us to pick the tutorial for Slack, or do you guys want to pick it? And we would just sort of partner back and forth. And so that was a big part of that. And I say that today because certainly through COVID, people have a lot more experience now working with apps and working remotely and figuring things out than even 2 to 3 years ago. But we will get on with them because all their apps are up and running that day. We can say, just doing a double check. I know you haven't been on Slack before. Do you want us to get on with you? And usually HR does that because IT is so darn busy. So as long as it's not one we've never worked with or whatever, we sort of hand off back and forth who can help this person based on what knowledge they're coming in with, making them feel comfortable and not condescended to, like, you're not in Slack, what's wrong with you? And so that's a big part of where we partner, is who can best teach, where can we have tutorials in advance to kind of let people save face. And then there's still troubleshooting that happens right in that first week. Who's the best to go help them? But that's sort of how our first day, and honestly our first week goes until they say, I am good, and they're off and running, is a mix of all of the above.
I love the idea of asking people beforehand and not assuming that they're going to come in and be able to use all the collaboration tools and the productivity tools. So I will definitely probably steal that for our own processes. So thank you. So onboarding is massively important for IT. Forget the perfect day. We know of customers who have spent multiple days properly onboarding individuals. Poor onboarding causes problems beyond the poor employee experience. IT support costs become prohibitive with multiple support tickets trying to onboard people. And then there's a downstream effect of that of 2, 3, 4 days later and weeks later when people realize that they don't have access to applications that they don't need. So Emily, we use ChartHop internally. I love the product, especially coming on new. I think it was probably the most used product of all of our productivity suites as I checked who was who, being new to the organization. So how do you see ChartHop's role in the onboarding process?
So we use ChartHop as, the source of truth for all of our people data. So this is where we enter all of our new hires, and then this reconciles with our ATS, which happens to be Greenhouse, and then our payroll benefits provider, which happens to be Sequoia. Basically, when I enter a new hire in ChartHop, it's announced into a Slack channel called org changes. So anytime we have comers or goers, it goes right into the Slack channel so everyone can see their face, what role they're in, when they're starting or leaving. Just creates transparency, and everyone is just aware of what's going on in their company. And then when the new hire arrives, they fill out this about me questionnaire in ChartHop, which is kind of like, I think user manual is the language that BetterCloud uses, but it's basically questions on how to work with this person and maybe some quirks or things that you wouldn't know about them that they want to share with their new colleagues. So those also go straight from ChartHop into a Slack channel where people can just kind of, read about these people that are joining their teams. So it really helps promoting, connectivity. We also use ChartHop to share data with various people involved in onboarding. So for example, somebody on the team is in charge of sending the new hire welcome boxes, right, that have snacks and swag. So there's a report that can just be shared with her in ChartHop. So she can't see any sensitive data, but she can see this sheet that has allergies and t-shirt size. And it's just there for her, and it just saves one step for me from having to go and get this information from her because she can just go get it. So that's kind of like on the admin side how things work, updating the org about new hires and making it easy to onboard somebody from a system perspective. And then for our new hires in terms of onboarding, to your point, Tommy, it's very much leveraged as a tool to understand the group of people that they've just joined. So they can jump into everyone's individual profiles, see what team they're on, how long they've been here, read their about me information, see what roles they might have been in before, read their job description so that it's super clear. They can see them on the org chart and understand who they report to, who their teammates are. They can also look at data shared with the org. So for example, we just did an engagement survey and I shared the results and a few different slices of the results, for example, from a DEI lens with the entire org. So when new hires join, they can see under reports the engagement survey results and they can transparently understand what is happening, where we need to improve, what's going really well, so that they're kind of, onboarded more quickly because they have that insight at their fingertips as they're joining.
Yeah, that's great. Like, ChartHop, for those that don't know, it has this view where you come in and it's an org chart and you can click into every employee and get more information about them. And the About Me section, we've leveraged that in BetterCloud to tell people what people like, what people don't like, what their pet peeves are. And it really helps coming in for me to like understand, I'm dealing with this person, they like, data-driven decisions, they like seeing the data, or they need collaboration, they like in-person meetings. You can really help, tailor as somebody coming in new. It was really beneficial for me to start building those relationships with people and getting insights into people. So really, really like the product. Courtney, OneLogin was designed to help create efficiencies in IT. How has this impacted the onboarding process?
Yeah, so, and by the way, super impressive, Emily. Now I'm going to tell everybody they have to go get ChartHop. It sounds like a really great tool, and you sold it really well. On my side, it's more about efficiency and security. It's not going to sound as sexy, but it's super important, right? So I talked about before, like that perfect first day when we try to eat what we cook, right? Is you come on board and you're not frustrated with passwords and you're not sitting there fumbling through things. And so, basically the gist of our platform that I know everybody loves so much and has made our life so much easier inside is you've got the OneLogin product suite that takes disparate systems, disparate apps, and pulls them together, behind the scenes for everybody. So as an example, everybody, I think you even used the word everyone does, Emily, someone has their truth, their point of truth or whatever, whether it's their Workday system or whatever it is. And like, that's their system. And so when somebody puts in a new user, like into an HRS system, then OneLogin creates a new account in Active Directory, right? Which then makes it super easy for us to give them all the apps we know they're going to need and use, so we can provision them. And it's fast and seamless, right? And it's on geography and it's on privilege access. So there's your security as well. It's wonderful for offboarding, definitely improve the offboarding process. But for onboarding, just that whole simplicity. So again, I keep using my own tagline when I think of the employee experience. It's going to be secure. It has to be secure, but that should not be a nightmare for anyone. And even trying to remember, like, I don't know what apps I want or when do I want them. And then even we're going to, provision them with the ones we know they need that are our core workforce products. But also then people want to add their own stuff. And when we are a security company, you can't just add everything you want under the sun anymore. So that partnership sort of continues, right? Of people saying, well, at my last company, I use this. So it's efficient, it's secure, but it also, from an IT and HR standpoint, think of all those one-off help desk tickets, or I can't find my password tickets. And so it frees up HR and IT to be able to do more of the personal stuff or more of the networking with them. And also just think of all the less like help desk tickets, right? The one-off help desk tickets. So it works for everyone. Works for the employee, works for HR, it works for IT. And it's just so much easier and more fun to do those first couple of days.
Yeah, at BetterCloud, we see automation as critical to streamlining that process to make it frictionless. And not only does it save time, but it really removes the potential for human error, and it makes the whole process more secure. And so we actually have an integration with OneLogin specifically and simply, to simplify that whole process and experience at BetterCloud. So this question is for both Emily and Courtney. What are some recommendations you can offer for onboarding remote hybrid employees efficiently? Let's start with Emily.
So I sound like I'm just keep promoting the social aspect, but I would really encourage each person to be intentional about forming connections. So, the sort of like casual, informal stuff is not going to happen as easily anymore, right? And it will take more time to build those relationships and have your team members know you, have your manager know you. So I think sharing about me type information with whatever tool you have is really key. And if IT can help to streamline that and automate it, that's amazing. Because then it just makes it faster for people to understand who you are, what you're about, how they can best work with you. Filling out one-on-one notes prior to one-on-ones, I'm a big fan of that. And again, this is where HR can partner with IT and using the tools they have to make that automated and streamlined. But in ChartHop, we use the one-on-one note template. It's simple, but it just shows up on your profile in ChartHop. So you can always have a record of your one-on-ones, and then your manager can put one-on-one notes next to that. And what's great about it is you can just be super clear about what you need out of your one-on-one, and you can take charge of your one-on-one. And I think that if employees are able to do that and they're empowered to do that, and there's a very clear agenda for one-on-ones, you're going to get more out of that time together. And I think that's really important, because you're not going to run into your manager and be able to have those conversations. So you need to maximize the time together. I think making a 90-day plan, collaborating on that with your manager, again, IT and HR can partner on how to make that part of your tools, but something that just tracks in terms of people, product, and process, what you need to learn in terms of people, product, and process, and what you need to achieve for the 30, 60, 90-day milestones. It's simple, but I love that framework. I think people can just use that, even if your company's not putting something in front of you that looks like that, to just make your onboarding experience the most effective that it can be. And I think go to the virtual social stuff. You know, it's like new for a lot of us. We might have gotten used to it over the past year, but it's definitely worthwhile to just get some time with your colleagues and get to know people. You know, when the world starts to open back up, we are also, like Courtney said, you know, going to offer some in-person meetups, doing our, you know, September offsite together. So if you can get yourself there, if you feel comfortable, I think stretching yourself in that way would be really important to get to know your colleagues, and, you know, do virtual coffees with your colleagues. Just try to be more intentional about the social stuff.
Absolutely. I know that when I started remotely, I did 32 one-on-ones within 3 weeks. So definitely was very social and creating those relationships early throughout the organization, which really feel that it contributes to like early success in the company.
Definitely.
So Courtney, just taking this over to you.
And I'm going to build off something you just said, because it's, I think Emily and I are very similar. Like, if you can make those first couple of days and first couple of weeks seamless, and you're doing that really well, what does it leave left? It leaves relationships and productivity, and they're not separate. In fact, in your first couple of months, they're critical. And I'm going to add something, and then I will answer your question, Tommy. But it made me think of it when Emily said it. Is certainly, she talked about the fact, if we don't do well, sometimes that person doesn't show up well. And I was just on another podcast about the importance of networks and hybrid, because we all think it's going to be ridiculously more important than it even already was. And the research shows that in 6 months, the people already there have formed the opinion, and it's almost unrecoverable, of the new hire. So it could be in 6 months where they're like, that Emily's a walking disaster, and maybe it was a bad hire, or maybe we just didn't do our job. And to her point, that person showed up and they couldn't function, and their computer wasn't working, and they missed the meeting, and they did whatever. Those get formed by the current employees really quickly. So why we also want to make sure certainly the experience is great for the employee. We want them to show up seamless quickly. We want them to show up productive. So someone says, that Emily, she was the greatest hire ever. She's already jumping in 2 weeks in. She's not floundering looking for passwords. So that 6 months number is, I think we all know it, that we've been in HR, we've seen it. Now there's data behind it. And it says, man, you got to get that right on both sides of the fence. So with that, your story, Tommy, I just hired an HR business partner, and I gave her 38 names on day one in what I would call her old school. I write it down, and I'm like, these are the 38 people you need to meet to go do your job, and to kind of get, as we call it, slingshotted into the network. But it was manual. And so I have a dream that because there is software to do it, I still think it will be somewhat me saying, hey, Emily, you need to go meet with Tommy. Let me tell you how he can help you. Or Emily, you need to know Tommy's a decision maker and carries a lot of power around here. I mean, there's all kinds of reasons you send someone out to know people before they need them at work. Mm-hmm. The software does it for you as well. So I'm still going to go back to I'm going to be a broken record on hybrid models. The software takes some of that bias out, and it actually shows you how work flows and who works with whom without an overlay of humans. And then you look at it and be like, why is Tommy in the middle of everybody's network? I didn't have him on my list to meet. And I can go then take the software telling me what's going on with what I think's going on as as a new people manager, and I can blend the two together. So that is where we're headed next. I do hope the rest of the world starts to use this software, but it requires IT's help. And then we're going to be able to have sort of the unbiased and the biased version. Neither of them are right or wrong. They just are. But we can start to hybrid how to help someone in those first 3 to 4 months, because you can't wait till month 6. They're done. Or they could have been saved in month 3. So kicking off right, but right in the middle is just as important to do these check-ins and make sure they're doing well and not wait till they're like, she's terrible, because it will never change someone's opinion at that point. And I think our HR and IT own a lot of that to make sure they come out of the gate really well by not floundering for problems that weren't their own.
Mm-hmm.
I love that. It's really the power of that first impression, and that I love taking the perspective that it's our job to help facilitate that first impression for the new employee. So, coming from a technology background, of course, my recommendation is going to be to utilize a SaaS management platform like BetterCloud to automate that entire onboarding process. We strive for 0 clicks from a technical side to onboard employees. And we really look at, what happens after the onboarding, what IT tickets happen 1 week, 2 weeks, 1 month into the process. Like, there's probably informal Slack channels that people are a part of, that a lot of conversations and a lot of collaboration happens that may not be part of that typical onboarding workflow. So, to really get somebody onboarded quickly and it to be frictionless, that's hugely important. So I would definitely recommend that everybody strive for 0 clicks from a technology side. So great. So that was kind of the end of the questions. So I think what we're going to do is we're going to open up Q&A. And if anybody has any questions, please use the Q&A section of the actual of the Zoom chat, and we'll go through these and answer questions. So one from Joseph, in your opinion, whose responsibility is it to perform the training on using various systems, ERP, other tools? Do you see that as the responsibility of IT or the responsibility of others in the employees department who are truly the SMEs on how the tool is used? In that department for the employee's role. As you can tell by my question, I see too many hiring managers expecting IT to be the experts on every system, which isn't at all practical. Do you want to take that one, Emily?
Sure. Yeah, I agree with you, Joseph. I think it should fall on the subject matter expert of that tool. I think IT serves as the advisor and behind the scenes, guidance counselor for that hiring manager in terms of how to implement that tool, how to roll it out, how to manage it. But they are the day-to-day expert using that tool, and it's up to them to manage their team in using that tool. So I don't think it's practical, especially in scaling organizations where there can be hundreds of different tools, that it falls on the usually small IT team to train everybody and be the owner of that tool. I think it makes more sense to be the person organizing behind the scenes, but not the face of each tool.
Yeah, and I think, Courtney, you had kind of you spoke and said that HR actually takes some lead in training on some of the basic kind of birthright applications also, correct?
Yeah, I mean, again, it's not like hundreds of apps and that, so we're capable of that one. And IT's so busy. I mean, to the point is like, nor should they do it all. And we're a tiny team too. But I mean, if we know like you're gonna, and we do teach this is when everybody flies in. We do a boot camp. So they go to 2 days of engineering boot camp where engineering teaches their tools and how they're used. We have a sales boot camp for 2 days. So after the first 2 days, they sort of meet with the CFO, about business models and all that kind of stuff, they sort of branch off into training that we just think is more effective in person with line leaders with them. But they're learning those tools then, right? But if you were to say, like, I'm having an ADP problem, of course, they're going to come to HR for things like that. But on that day one, it's like, okay, Slack, you've never used it. Did you see the tutorial? I still think we should try to get them to kind of self-serve themselves. But like, okay, we use Expensify or Centrify or whatever for our expenses. Do you have any questions on that? Can I show you? So we wouldn't need to bug IT for that. We will bug IT if we're struggling with something, but we try to take the burden off them. Sales tries to take the burden off by knowing their own sales tools. Engineer takes them off. And that's what they do in the 5 days we're with us, actually, is trying to get indoctrinated by the experts for those processes or for those tools. They put them through demos, they put them through trainings in some cases to take the burden off of IT.
Great. From an HR perspective, what repetitive tasks during the onboarding process would you want IT to automate if they could? I feel like I can answer this, but I'll give Emily, do you want to speak to this at all, or do you want me to?
Sure. I mean, the biggest pain point right now, because we don't have an IT person or a BetterCloud, is adding people to the email groups, for example, that they need to be a part of. And the various channels in Slack, and to the various tools that they need to be a part of. So it's just very manual, and we actually have our CEO's assistant adding everybody to the software that they need, adding everybody to the email group. So it's just very manual, very error prone, and it ends up making for that day one experience where people can't get into things, and it's distracting and frustrating. So I think definitely the tools, email groups, those are the main things that I can think of right now.
Cool. Courtney, do you have anything to add to that?
I would add, and I still don't have a solution, so I'm going to take total ownership for this. I thought about it when Emily said it, because we're pretty good with the tools and stuff, because it's all automated for them, and then it's just teaching them. But so for instance, all directors and above get to come to an extended exec staff meeting every 6 weeks that we just open up. And it's still manual. So someone will be like, I've been going. And we're like, oh, we forgot to invite you. And then we'll be like, who owns the alias for that? And it's just your typical, unless you really stop and think through, and we are tiny too, but you stop and think through, we're so worried about getting up and functioning that there's these things that are a big deal. But if it's 6 weeks away from that staff meeting, none of us are thinking about it right now until the person doesn't show up. And then it's like, wait, I thought the admin was doing it. I thought the leader was going to say it. I thought HR would automatically add them. So we haven't mastered that yet. So it's things like that, I believe, are just super helpful to think through and then have an automatic connection. Kind of like we provision people today for the apps, is everything that's not an app. I think it would be nice to kind of be able to provision them and know exactly where they should be and with what working group, but we're not there yet.
Right.
So question for Tommy, how do you recommend starting an initiative like this? What are the first steps IT can take to drive alignment? So for us, we started out with some onboarding workflows that were generally what we would call birthright apps. So your Slack, your emails, anything, Zoom, anything that everyone would have access to. So we had some general workflows and automations based on those birthright applications. But then what we did was we started embedding with each department and really trying to understand the nuances and kind of the unspoken IT technical challenges that each department had and their specific needs as stakeholders, and started building out additional workflows for each of those departments. So, we would get into stuff, and our goal was always zero touch onboarding. We don't want to have to touch anything. And so we would talk to the security team, and the security team, wouldn't want people to, for instance, get access to all these applications before they would go through the security training. And so we would automate stuff for that specific use case, it might be hey, we're going to have people attend the meeting. We're going to have the automation workflow monitor to make sure that they attended that meeting and we're there until the end of the meeting before we actually kick off workflows. And so that's how I think that we've really driven down the amount of clicks, is just going into each one of those departments. And really the unexpected benefit is that these downstream tickets with that level of automation. We were really surprised with the amount of IT tickets that we eliminated from the process. It's like if you get this first thing when people come through the door right, and you really, really hit every place that they need access to, it's not like these things change that often. And the amount of tickets that we just prevented from coming in later in the process was really, really surprising to me, how that was reduced. So that's what I would say is start out with kind of a general broad stroke of your birthright applications, and then start interfacing with each department and understanding what are those like nuanced Slack channels, what are the nuanced distribution groups that are kind of unwritten anywhere. And that really, really helps with driving value to each of those departments. So apart from onboarding, what are some of the other opportunities for HR and IT to create a better employee experience, especially in a hybrid model? So Emily, you kind of lit up and nodded your head, so we'll let you kind of go first here.
Well, I was just going to say the fondest memories that I have in partnering with IT are those, all hands events or team offsites, where you just have to work together, and it's this fast-paced event, but you make sure that it's truly treated like an event, and that the people there can focus on being with each other and the work they need to do, but that everything else is handled. So from an IT perspective, a lot falls on IT there, right? To make sure that everything is working and set up appropriately, and that you're there to handle things. So I think in this hybrid world where, we're working remotely, but then we come together, those together moments are going to be even more important. So they need to go very well. And so I think the partnership with IT and HR will be really strong in those moments.
Yeah, and I'll build on that one. So I've been a remote worker for 25 years, I think, because my first half of my HR career was overseeing go-to-market for American Express and for GlaxoSmithKline. So nobody ever was they were everywhere. They were salespeople. And so no one cared where I lived, thank God, at the time. But I can tell you, and it's not that different today. And I think as we go back to hybrid, because hybrid is so much more complex than anyone thinks. And it's also double the work. It's easier to have everyone at home or everybody in the office. So we're about to do a mid-year sales kickoff in person, and now you got to have 2 experiences, ideally just as good. They'll be totally different. So you're doubling on the work, right? For the people who'll be watching us from EMEA and the people who will be in Berkeley in a ballroom again. And if we're going to continue to go that way, we have to acknowledge it's double work for everybody every time we try to have somewhat of an equal experience. But it's just simple things, but it's not. For 25 years, including during COVID, I might have been the only one not drivable, and to go do something even with masks. And like, for instance, in our office, we have one room with cameras. And I was positive they made them go in when I first got there because I wanted to teach out of there, right? And as someone for 25 years has been sitting on the other side where they get up at a flip chart and the energy's gone there, and I don't want to be like, I can't see, and by the way, there's not a camera, and I just don't talk for a while. And then an hour later, we'll say, Courtney, what do you think? And I'm like, trying to hang on. I couldn't see any of that. And they're like, sorry. And then someone moves the flip chart. Well, we solved that with things like investing the money and having cameras and stuff but you still need, so we have that now in a couple of rooms, but then no one operates the cameras. And so I don't know if it's HR or the lines, but if you really start to think about hybrid in that experience, is that someone's job in a scrum that's going on all day or a sprint, who's constantly thinking about the person on camera and realize the whole room's gone to a whiteboard, a home's gone over there? Because even if you have the equipment and it hasn't moved, you might as well have not had it. And I can tell you, being on the other side, and you've all experienced it for the last year and a half, it's hard to speak up when there's energy in the room. You don't want to stop and be like, I can't see. And so it just becomes a disparate experience for that person, when I just think we have to think more about IT, AV, how that room is being curated for the day or program managed for the day. And maybe it's someone's job to just be there and be like, every time the room moves, did the camera go with it? Things like that. So it sounds simple, but it's really easy to have the have and have nots. Whether someone wanted to fly in and you don't have the money, or it's not safe, or there's not enough room, is to really think about that remote experience when people are back in the old school way of being able to jump up and see everything and jump up on a flip chart. I think we got to get ready for that.
Mm-hmm. Something too that I'd like to add, and this might be controversial with the IT crowd, but I think for the first couple of weeks, no tickets for new hires. That's kind of the rule that I've worked with. And so basically, if a new hire has an IT question, that they can go directly to the IT person without doing a ticket. And the point being, if they're having so many questions, that means we need to do a better job in terms of onboarding and that self-service information. But it's just a better experience for the person to have a human being to go to instead of, oh, just submit a ticket for that. It's kind of like, passing them off into the ether. And it's just feels like a nicer, warmer, fuzzier experience to just have a human being to go to.
Great, great. So we're coming up on time. I really would like to thank Emily and Courtney for their input on and being a part of this first summer series webinar. I'm going to share out some information about if you would like to contact these companies, these great companies that we work with, OneLogin, ChartHop, or BetterCloud, and sign up for a demo. But I really appreciate your time, and thanks everybody for coming to the first webinar, and hope to see you for series 2 and 3.
Thanks,
Thanks
Tommy.
everyone.
Thank you so much.